The warehouse smelled of old rope and warm dust, that particular tang that sales and summers leave behind. Pale light dragged itself across the concrete like a tired animal, catching on a drift of confetti. No, not confetti. Ledger pages cross-cut into strips and left like streamers after a parade for the dead. Somewhere a shredder whirred its last sigh. Somewhere a gull scolded the morning. On the table lay the contract face up, the ink still damp in strokes I recognized too well. My father taught me to know a hand by its patience, the angle of an A, the discipline of an M. This signature was both patient and disciplined, except for one impossible fact. It was mine. It was in that split second, as the truth unfurled like a dark cloud, that hope shattered into a million pieces. Footsteps tapped behind me. I turned to the glass wall and its trembling city beyond. The old clock on the pier tower said 7:42. I traced the forged curve of my name and exhaled a prayer I didn't believe in. The company was gone, transferred to a shell with a cheerful name and a hungry mouth. A name on the final page snagged my eye. The counter-signature, Tomás Villarreal, my god-brother, my best man, the only person alive who could mimic my hand without a second draft. I didn't feel the chair slip as I sat. I only felt the deadline stamped at the bottom of the page. Board confirmation, Saturday midnight. My phone vibrated in my palm. A board alert. Finalize sale authorization. I stared at the button until it pured into color. I had 72 hours to prove the theft, or watch my father's flag come down from the mast and vanish into somebody else's story. The shredder clicked back to life. I killed the power, and the room went quiet enough to hear my shame. By the door, a red exit sign blinked. I whispered to it or to myself, "Right, exit." But the door swung in before I could reach it, and Tomás's shadow lengthened across my feet. We grew up with salt on our tongues and numbers under our nails. My father kept 2 altars, the statue of St. Michael in his office, and the old leather ledger that logged every penny since the day the first crate was lifted by our crane. I learned to swear at rust and pray over margins. Tomás learned faster, smoother, easier. His genius was the kind that made everyone forgive his style. The night I buried my father, Tomás poured me a drink and said, "It is not the strong who keep a company. It's the stubborn." We laughed then. I remember the warmth of the whiskey, the glow of the shipyard lamps, the rustle of black suits. He kept his hand on my shoulder like a brother would. Now his name shone in fresh ink beside my stolen one. I called Aunt Leela, the archivist nobody believed we needed until the day we did. She answered on the second ring, owl-voiced from sleep. "I told your father to make microfilm of everything. Get down here, Nina. If there's a paper trail, it's wearing corsets and hiding in the stacks." "And the board?" I asked. "The board is punctual," she said. "So be faster." I checked the sale packet again. The servers, our logs, approvals, and the security footage from the finance floor were scheduled for a compliance purge on Saturday at dawn. If I couldn't pull the footage and the original approvals by then, the vote at midnight would be unquestionable gospel. 71 hours, 42 minutes. I set a timer. "Stubborn," I repeated. "Like a vow and a joke at once," Aunt Lila added almost kindly. "Bring comfortable shoes." I closed the warehouse door and met my reflection in the glass, hair tied back, jacket still pressed, eyes like a storm at sea. Practical did not mean heartless, my father would have said. It only meant you could stand in the rain and still count. My phone chimed. Timer started. 71:59:59. And from the far end of the corridor, a camera swiveled with a tiny metallic cough. Marco met me at the archives. "You look like you slept in an argument," he said. Ex-cop humor dry as driftwood. "I slept in a theft," I said. He glanced at the building. "You brought legal?" "You brought cookies. Either improves your odds." Aunt Lila led us into her labyrinth. Narrow aisles, boxes labeled in handwriting that looked like lace. Somewhere in the back, an industrial dehumidifier hummed like a fat bee. "Corporate keeps its memory on a leash," she said. "But this place bites." We found what we needed in a grey box under a note that read, "For when they smile too much." The record of authorizations for digital signatures dating back 20 years, complete with calibration samples. My hand, my father's, Tomás's. Enough to convince an honest person, perhaps enough to frighten a dishonest one. "Get the server footage," Marco said. "Paper makes a point. Video ends the argument." The server room sat on the 5th floor of finance. guarded by two things I do not recommend underestimating: a keypad that required a code only Tomas and two others possessed, and a retired canine named Sable who had developed a taste for pant cuffs. "We'll need a distraction," Marco said. "We'll need Tomas's code," I said. "And we'll need better shoes," Aunt Lila said, eyeing my heels as if to mark its territory. Sable barked once, deep, territorial, unimpressed. My phone vibrated again. 68-2103, we took the stairs. We carried nothing we couldn't drop. The plan was simple, which is to say, it was the kind that works until it doesn't. At the landing, I stopped at a photograph of my father cutting a ribbon. Tomas is in the frame, smiling, hand on my shoulder. The keypad light blinked red. So I lifted my hand toward the keys. "Don't," a voice behind me said. "He changed the code this morning." I turned. It was Sophia, Tomas's sister, hair pinned back like a dagger, eyes full of a complicated mercy. Sophia handed me a small gold locket, its hinges worn soft by the years. "He told me to give you this if you ever doubted him," she said. "Said you'd know what to do with it." I opened it. An old photograph of the three of us at the waterfront, me holding a paper crown, Tomas holding a paper sword. Tucked behind the photo was a wafer-thin drive, polished to a mirror. "You expect me to believe in scavenger hunts now?" I asked. "I expect you to choose carefully," she said. "He's not the only one who keeps accounts." Her meaning landed like a cold draft. People who want a port also want what arrives through it. Protection is an old word here, older than any of us. My father had refused it and paid in sleepless nights. Had Tomas said yes where we had said no? I went to the chapel on 9th before we pressed on, because sometimes the oldest tool is the right one. I sat where my father sat when the numbers bruised him, and I made a tally of the costs. Revenge felt clean in the mind and heavy in the hand. What is a company without its honor? What is honor without the truth? And what is truth without mercy? The locket's drive clicked into the laptop with a neat little chime, so cheerful it felt obscene. A folder opened with a single file. Accounts payable, private. I looked at Marco. He shrugged. "If it bites, we'll bark. Payments. Not to the shell that would swallow us, but to names I'd heard muttered in corners. To security consultants who did not have websites. Money moving not to enrich Tomas, but to keep trucks from burning and cranes from stalling." My breath wavered. He'd paid the piper. He'd picked a fight with the dark, so our light stayed on. And yet he had forged my name. I closed the laptop. "The servers still purge at dawn," I said. Whatever his reasons, he stole our say in our own fate. Sophia nodded, not asking for absolution, only time. "He's at the old terminal at sunset. He said if you found the locket, you'd come." The pier clock said 6:53 when we reached the terminal. Wind lifted the flags. Somewhere below, the tide chewed on old wood. I saw Tomas's silhouette against the glass alone, a man waiting at the edge of what he had done. Behind us, a black sedan idled. Two men in shirts without wrinkles watched the water like it might confess. "You chose to talk," I said, "because it was better than hello." Tomas smiled like a sad saint. "I chose to be small enough to fit in your crosshairs. You forged my name." "I shielded the company long enough to make this sale possible," he said. "We get out clean with enough to start new, away from the men who think your father's ledger is old poetry." "You stole my choice," I said. He took a breath. "I took your anger and hired it to protect you." Marco's phone hummed. "We're out of time," he said. "If you want any chance at the footage, it's now or never." Tomas slid a card across the bench. "Code's on there. Give yourself the evidence you think you need." He looked past me at the sedan. "You won't walk alone after midnight, Elena. Practice liking that." We ran. Sable met us with a low woof that said we were late. Sophia called him by name, offered a biscuit from her sleeve, and earned a single enormous lick. The keypad accepted Tomas's code like an apology. Inside, the chill raised goose flesh on my arms. 2 racks of servers thrummed, a metal choir. I slipped the locket's drive into the port and started the pull. Access logs, digital signatures, timestamps. The security feed from the hallway outside the document prep room on the screen. 52 hours ago, Tomas stood alone at the table. 2 pens set neatly side by side. He didn't sign. He didn't bring a forger. He did something worse. He fed printed letters into a machine that assembled my signature from 1,000 tiny fragments of my own past approvals. A mosaic I couldn't refute with mere certainty. He made a ghost of me and let it speak. My anger was brief and volcanic. It moved through me, left ash, left clarity. I copied everything, encrypted it, mailed it to myself, to Aunt Lila, to an attorney who still sent Christmas cards. The purge would fire at dawn. I pulled power on the local backup and felt a terrible practical satisfaction. In the doorway, someone cleared his throat. Tomas filled the frame. If you have never seen a friend transform into an adversary, let me tell you, the face doesn't change. You just finally read the whole of it. Done? He asked. Almost, I said, clicking send. Good, he said, and stepped aside so the men from the sedan could enter. We chose the boardroom for the confrontation because that's where respectable wars are fought. Midnight lapped at the windows. The harbor threw up its lights like scattered coins. Our directors sat with their pens arranged like little bayonets. Tomas stood at the head of the table, coat off, cuffs rolled, the poster boy for a man who gets things done. Sophia sat near the end, hands folded, a tiny part of her locket chain glinting under the fluorescence. Marco took a chair by the door, unimpressed by the theater. I placed the drive on the table. Before you vote, I said, you need to see what you are voting on. The footage rolled, the mosaic signature, the transfers, the payments to the men in unwrinkled shirts. The compliance purge timer flickering in a corner of my screen like a little cheerful bomb. There were threats, Tomas said. You all knew there were threats. Elena's father would not pay. His grave is proof of both his courage and his error. I paid. The sale is the only way to end the protection racket without blood. And the forgery? I asked, my voice steady in a way that surprised me. He looked at me the way a surgeon looks at a bone, knowing it will hurt. You would never have agreed while there was anything left to save. You would have fought to the last nickel. I took choice away to give you another day. The chair of the board, a woman who had balanced accounts longer than either of us had been alive, tapped her pen. This is not about romance, she said. It is about risk and law, I swallowed. The tide in my chest rose. Then count this. If you proceed, I take the evidence public at dawn. The shell will wither under investigation. We may die by inches, but the men in the sedan will lose their clean exit. Or we halt the sale, open the books, disclose the protection payments, and ask for the kind of help that arrives when you stop pretending you don't need it. Silence is not empty, for it is busy dividing. Tomas's jaw tightened. You'll bring wolves through the front door. They're already in the pantry, I said. I'm just turning on the light. He glanced at Sophia, then at the directors. Give me 10 minutes. We can route the sale to a buyer with enough teeth to keep us safe and enough distance to call it legal. No headlines, no crusades. I thought of my father's ledger, the tidy columns, the small stern handwriting. He believed in paying what you owe. I won't launder this, I said. Not our name. He stepped closer, low enough that only I could hear. Then you will pay. In friends, in sleep, in the small quiet ways that make a person smaller. Make your ledger, Elena. There is always a price. I reached into my pocket and felt the warm circle of the locket. There was a humorless wisdom in what he said. I hated it because it was probably true. I looked at the board. We halt the sale. We notify council, the bank, and the police. We ask for federal help to explain our payments before someone else explains them for us. Can't we remove Tomas from his post effective immediately? Tomas inhaled, the sound a tiny shipwreck in his throat. And when the men in the sedan come to collect? Marco stood, a hint of a grin. Then they'll find the room crowded. Vote, I said. The A's rose like a slow tide. Dawn laid its first pale coins across the harbor. The purge timer hit 0 on servers we had already bled. The men in the sedan drove away, not in defeat, not yet, but with caution, which is a start. Paperwork bloomed. Phones warmed. Council began to draft the sentences that would keep us housed. I found Tomas on the pier, the same place we had stood as children, crowns and swords made of paper and pretense. He stared at the tide like it might change its mind. You win, he said without looking at me. No, I said. We both lost. I just chose my loss. He handed me the locket. Keep it. You always were better at holding on to things. I wanted a speech worthy of our ruin. Tradition likes speeches. In the end, I chose the practical truth. You broke my name to save my life. I saved my name to keep it worth having. Neither of us is going to sleep well. He nodded once, the old weary acknowledgement of men who move cargo and know the cost of weight. I'll leave by noon. Leave a forwarding address, I said. We're still family, even if only in the way a scar is a kind of family to a wound. A gull laughed, rude and honest. Marco waved from the quay, holding 2 paper cups of coffee like a peace offering. Black, he said, handing me one. Because cream is for optimists. Aunt Lila joined us, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. I found your father's first ledger, she said. You know what he wrote on the inside cover? She opened it and let me read the tidy script. All accounts settle in gold or in kind. I traced the letters and felt the old world put a hand on my shoulder. We would open the books. We would tell the truth. We would be smaller for a while, but we would be ours. When I finally went back inside, I replaced the ledger on its shelf, one page missing, a necessary tear saved in my pocket. The pier clock chimed the hour. The sound rang clear as a bell struck on steel. That's the thing about prices. Pay enough of them and even the wind starts to sound like a receipt. Like the story? Honor the craft, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Your support keeps the lights on.